You're listening to Kingdom Thinking, a podcast series designed to start a conversation around the deeper intellectual questions surrounding life, faith, and meaning. Here are a collection of questions, ideas, and stories that I hope will challenge you to think about your own beliefs, and perhaps introduce you to new perspectives, regardless of where you are in your journey. I'm your host, Al Butcher, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. This episode is about the perceived clash between science and faith as ways of discovering truths about our universe. Does the current advancement of scientific knowledge and discovery rule out the possibility of or need for a God? And in fact, how do the two types of knowledge even relate to one another? Today, I want to address a claim or underlying belief that I believe has, to some extent, permeated secular culture and views on religion, due in no small part to the work of prominent atheists like Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, and William Nye. I often encounter this misconception in my day-to-day life, particularly when talking with my contemporaries at my university. I study mathematics and information technology, and often before long in my conversations with the people alongside whom I study, the topic of my faith invariably comes up. I am then often met with something between confusion and surprise. Many have in fact outright expressed the belief that it seems very strange to them that I would be a Christian, but study the subject that I do at the level that I am. And here is where I want to point out the contention. The claim made in the recent past by prominent atheist thinkers is that scientific advancements has ruled out the need for God. In fact, some have gone even further and argued that scientific advancement has ruled out or overtaken philosophy as a whole. Stephen Hawking, the prominent British physicist, is quoted as having said, "It is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue torch paper and set the universe going. Philosophy is dead. It is not kept up with modern developments in science, particularly in physics. As a result, scientists have become the bearers of the torch in our quest for knowledge." Still many others deride God as a fairy story that we used to need to explain the storms outside, the earthquakes beneath us, or the movement of the planets around us. And now that our scientific understanding has advanced sufficiently that we understand those things, science either has or soon will answer all the questions we previously needed God to answer, and therefore religious faith will die off. This creates an image of muddy, ignorant religious bumpkins gradually being educated and replaced by brilliant atheists as time marches onwards. There seems to be this continuing perception that being a Christian or a person of faith is unscientific. There has been a continuous and concerted effort by the New Age atheist community to paint science and religious faith as strictly opposed to one another, suggesting that faith makes one unscientific, or that those with scientific knowledge have no need for religion. The argument pressed is that we don't need faith anymore, that we have grown out of it as a species, that it was a flicker of a bygone era, something to comfort us in the storms and to help us be a little less afraid of the dark. It's an excellent story, I must say, and it's one that serves the militant atheist and secularist extremely well. It's just unfortunate that it happens to be completely untrue. In fact, we are beginning to, at the academic level, see a continued rejection of this story over even the last year, but it still seems to permeate general society in a shocking way. So I think that it's worth focusing on three main points as to why this story of science either conflicting with or replacing religious belief is untrue. First, something I've intentionally neglected to do up until now is to actually provide a concrete definition of what these two things really are. What actually is science? What actually is faith? Well, first of all, science, broadly speaking, is the study of the physical and natural world through observations and experiments. You know, very often in those kinds of pop science TV shows or on those articles, we hear things like, science has proved this or science has proved that, without actually questioning what science is. Science is actually a systematic examination of the world around us through the application of the scientific method using observations and experiments. To then talk about faith, I'm going to narrow my discussion to focus on the Christian faith, both in the interests of time and brevity, and also because it is the faith with which I am most familiar. Christian faith is briefly summarized as belief in the doctrines laid out in the Christian Bible. An important point here to note is that Christian faith is never actually blind. Christians believe in the Bible as the evidence of their claims being true. This may be insufficient evidence for you, which is your prerogative, but ultimately Christian faith is never simply pulled from nothing, but is rather based on the historical writing present in the Bible. These Christian doctrines I spoke of extend to belief in the existence of an intelligent and rational creator, but not strictly in six-day creationism, and the sovereignty of God, along with many other things. And now we get to the guts of where I actually believe the flaw in the atheistic argument lies. At its core, science only claims to study the events and phenomena occurring in the natural world around us. Science is the study of colors, gravity, air, chemical reactions, the human body, and many other topics. It is truly a fine thing. However, all too often, atheist scientists extend this definition of science to include the ardent belief that the natural physical world is all that there is, claiming that doing science involves dismissing the existence of the supernatural altogether, which is an untrue extension of what science actually is and what its purposes are. Science studies the natural world only because those who practice it are aware of its limits, something I'll discuss later. Religious claims like Christianity are a set of beliefs about the supernatural and its interactions with the natural, past, present, and future. Therefore, religious beliefs and claims at their core deal with and describe something entirely different to scientific beliefs. The real meat of Christianity is in its ability to answer questions like, why are we here? What gives our life purpose? What happens when I die? These are questions that, quite rightly, serious science makes no attempt to wade into. Equally so, one will not find within the pages of the Bible a proof of the Riemann hypothesis, or a full copy of the periodic table of the elements, complete with all the ones we may have missed so far. Ultimately, science and religion are different methods for seeking truth, different ways of understanding reality. If you asked me why the kettle in the kitchen was boiling, I might tell you that the element within the kettle is heating up, causing the water particles within to become more and more excited, acquiring more and more energy, while more and more of the particles turn into gas. Or I could simply tell you that I'm boiling the kettle because it is 2 p.m, and I would quite like a cup of tea. The one explanation does not supplant the other. In fact, both of them give the listener a fuller picture of what is actually going on. To suggest otherwise is to misunderstand the purpose of either science, religion, or both. However, even further to this, it's worth understanding the faith and assumptions that underlie scientific experimentation. Science is grounded in 2 primary things: observation and experiments. For both of these things to be reliable, we have to make massive steps of faith. First, in order for our observations to be reliable, the equipment we use to make those observations must also be reliable. Now, while we used to do science with just our eyes, while we now have telescopes and mass spectrometers and all sorts of modern gadgets to do our observing for us, at some level we still use our physical, natural processes to make observations, hypotheses, and theories. However, if there were no God, we'd probably have extremely good reason to doubt our natural observational equipment. How would we, if we were made out of random cosmic accidents, having gained intelligence at some random point along the road, justify our belief in our own perceptions? Why should the universe be as we observe it? What reason would we have to trust these strange perceptions that we seem to have and seem to rely on so much? How do we know that this information is reliable? After all, it's only electric currents within our brain. Secondly, to perform experiments, repeated trials and tests, and then to apply those to real-life situations, aren't we assuming some level of rationality, of pattern to the world? Aren't we assuming that because a certain thing behaved one way a certain time, that it will do so again in the future? We seem to be assuming the existence of some rules or laws of nature that the universe must follow. Yet, with no God, why should we expect this? Why should we expect rationality in a universe created by random, undirected forces? Why should we believe that an ordered, beautiful universe should arise from a disordered beginning? This, more than anything else, flies in the face of modern scientific understanding. To quote Paul Davies, winner of both the Kelvin Medal and the Faraday Prize for Physics, "It may seem bizarre, but in my opinion, science offers a surer path to God than religion. People take it for granted that the physical world is both ordered and understandable. The underlying order in nature, the laws of physics, are simply accepted as given as brute facts. Nobody asks where they came from, at least they do not like to do so in polite company. However, even the most atheistic scientist accepts as an act of faith that the universe is not absurd, that there is a rational basis to physical existence manifested as law-like order in nature that is at least partly comprehensible to us. So science can proceed only if the scientist adopts essentially a theological worldview." Now, to be clear, I'm not for a moment suggesting that science is doomed or unreliable, or even that atheists can't make good scientists. But rather, in order for science to do any business, it must first make those two very large assumptions, both of which actually make a lot more sense from a religious viewpoint, not less. That the universe should be rational and ordered makes a lot more sense if you believe in a rational creator. That we should be able to observe and understand the universe makes a lot more sense if you believe in a God who wants to be found and marveled at in nature. In fact, at their core, Christianity and science complement one another very well, which is why for a great many years the church was at the forefront of championing scientific discovery. Many of the great scientists and mathematicians, like Isaac Newton, Kurt Gödel, or Gottfried Leibniz, have also been staunchly convinced theists. Finally, to close, the last essential problem with this narrative about science replacing or disproving Christianity is that it fundamentally misunderstands why believers, Christians in particular, actually believe in God. Christians don't believe in God as a way to explain what they don't understand. Christians don't, for example, look at the complexity of the human body and think, "Goodness, I have no idea how that could have come together, it must be God." There seems to be this perception that religious people of the world hold to some idea of a God of the gaps, that whenever we have a gap in our understanding of the world, we'll just call it God and have done with it. I can agree with the atheists that if this was the only reason why Christians believed in God, then there would be good reason to think that science was replacing religious faith. However, this narrative, this story could not be further from the truth. Speaking from my personal experiences, both of my own life and in doing volunteer ministry, most people don't come to belief in God either in childhood, youth, or adulthood due to a lack of understanding. Rather, so many Christians come to faith after being positively convinced of the beautiful truths contained within the Bible about the person that is and was Jesus Christ. So many Christians ground their faith in personal experiences, in understanding of their own stories, and the deep enrichment that a Christian life offers. So many Christians ground their faith in the enduring and soul-deep satisfaction, fulfillment, and affirmation found in Christianity that they have not managed to find anywhere else. Our faith is not in a God of the gaps, and as science explains more and more of how our natural universe works, it's not the case that our faith in God retreats. Christianity and science are not opposed in their pursuit for truth, nor does one rule out the need for the other. Instead, the scientist who is confident in his faith can marvel anew at the works of God and how he has accomplished his purposes within creation. We wonder at the beauty of the stars and galaxies hanging in the heavens around us, and the fantastic complexity of even the smallest building blocks of life. I'd simply leave you with a quote from Sir Joseph Thomson, the founder of the field of atomic physics and a Physics Nobel Prize winner. As we conquer peak after peak, we see in front of us regions full of interest and beauty, but we do not see our goal. We do not see the horizon. In the distance tower still higher peaks, which will yield to those who ascend them still wider prospects and deepen the feeling, the truth of which is emphasized by every advance in science, that great are the works of the Lord. Thank you for listening to this episode of Kingdom Thinking. I release new episodes every week, so jump on the Kingdom Thinking Facebook page for notifications about episodes as they come out, as well as information about the episodes like transcripts. Until next time, have a great week and God bless.